Part 1. Now then, let me tell you about a morning in first-century Rome, when the world moved to the ancient rhythm of yeast and flame, and the most complex philosophical debate a man might face involved determining the precise difference between acceptably golden bread and bread that was slightly less baked than last Thursday. A distinction that apparently required the sort of detailed memory for baking schedules that would challenge even the most organized senator. This was Rome at the height of its bread-obsessed glory, when the emperor's popularity depended more on grain distributions than military victories, and when the phrase bread and circuses had not yet been coined because everyone was too busy arguing about optimal crust consistency to develop clever political slogans. The morning sun rose over the seven hills with the sort of dependable authority that suggested it understood its essential role in the great Roman enterprise of turning wheat into the staff of life, casting golden light through the narrow streets where the aroma of baking bread competed with less pleasant urban fragrances for dominance of the city's aromatic landscape. On a corner where three busy streets converged in the sort of chaotic intersection that made Roman traffic management an ongoing experiment in controlled disaster, Marcus Flavius the baker was beginning another day in his lifelong conversation with dough, ovens, and customers whose expectations regarding bread quality seemed to increase in direct proportion to their willingness to complain about pricing. His small bakery occupied the ground floor of a typical Roman apartment building, with living quarters above and a shop front that opened directly onto the street according to the commercial architecture that made every neighborhood a marketplace. Now, if you're enjoying our stories, please give us a like and subscribe to support our channel and help us make it even better. After all, there are still 3 more parts of this wonderfully chaotic morning waiting to unfold, and we'd love to share them with you. The bakery itself was a masterpiece of practical Roman engineering, designed to maximize bread production while minimizing the risk of burning down the entire neighborhood, a consideration that had become increasingly important as Rome's population density reached levels that made fire prevention a matter of civic survival rather than mere commercial prudence. The brick ovens dominated the workspace, their arched openings glowing like miniature gates to Vulcan's forge, radiating the sort of steady heat that could transform humble flour and water into the foundation of civilization itself. The ovens had been heating since well before dawn, following the ancient baker's schedule that required starting work while sensible citizens were still debating whether the day was worth acknowledging. Marcus had learned through years of experience that proper bread required not just correct ingredients and adequate technique, but precise timing that began with oven preparation during the dark hours and continued through the complex choreography of mixing, kneading, rising, and baking that would produce loaves ready for sale when hungry Romans began their daily search for sustenance. The dough preparation area was arranged with the sort of military precision that reflected Marcus's understanding that bread-making was fundamentally a battle against time, temperature, and the inexplicable tendency of customers to want their bread exactly as they remembered it from some idealized previous purchase that might or might not have actually occurred. Large wooden bowls held various stages of dough development, from the initial mixture that looked more like expensive mud than future bread, to the properly risen dough that had achieved the sort of promising elasticity that suggested successful transformation was possible. But it was the street-level retail area that truly defined the character of Marcus's operation. This space served as stage, marketplace, and diplomatic forum where the ancient art of bread selling required skills that combined salesmanship, meteorology, psychology, and the sort of patient customer service that could defuse tensions between people whose morning mood depended entirely on bread quality and availability. The morning's first customers were already gathering outside his shop, displaying the sort of determined patience that characterized Romans queuing for essential services. These early buyers represented the most serious bread consumers, people whose daily routines depended on obtaining specific types of loaves before the sun reached full strength and the city's heat made carrying fresh bread a challenge requiring strategic planning. Among the waiting customers, Marcus could identify the usual collection of neighborhood regulars whose preferences he had learned through months or years of daily interaction. There was Gaius the scribe, whose precise demands for exactly the same brownness as yesterday's loaf but with slightly more salt tested Marcus's memory and diplomatic skills in equal measure. Behind him stood Livia the tavern keeper, whose commercial bread requirements demanded both quantity and the sort of consistent quality that would satisfy customers whose sobriety levels varied unpredictably throughout the day. But it was the presence of two dogs that truly marked this as a typical morning at Marcus's bakery. These were not random street animals but established members of the neighborhood commercial community, Brutus and Cassius, named either for their noble bearing or for their tendency to form conspiracies against unwary bread vendors, depending on one's perspective on canine psychology and classical literature. Brutus was a large, sand-colored dog whose patient demeanor suggested philosophical acceptance of the daily bread distribution ritual, while Cassius was smaller and more energetic, displaying the sort of optimistic enthusiasm that indicated complete confidence in his ability to obtain food through charm, persistence, or strategic positioning. Both dogs had learned the baker's schedule with precision that would have impressed Roman military planners, arriving each morning at exactly the moment when bread scraps became available through either deliberate generosity or accidental dropping. "Good morning, citizens," Marcus called to his waiting customers, using the sort of cheerful formality that successful Roman merchants employed to maintain proper social relationships while also establishing their professional competence. "Today's baking is proceeding according to schedule, and I'm pleased to report excellent results from yesterday's grain deliveries." This announcement was part information and part performance, designed to reassure customers about quality while also demonstrating Marcus's attention to the sort of technical details that separated serious bakers from casual bread vendors. The reference to grain quality was particularly important, as Romans had developed sophisticated understanding of the relationship between wheat varieties and final bread characteristics. Gaius immediately stepped forward with the sort of focused intensity that suggested he had been mentally rehearsing his bread order during the walk to the bakery. "Marcus, my friend," he began with the diplomatic courtesy that Romans employed when making requests that might prove complicated, "I require a loaf of your finest white bread, but with specific attention to achieving the same level of doneness that you produced last Thursday morning. Not Wednesday's batch, which was perfectly acceptable but perhaps slightly more golden than optimal, and certainly not Friday's loaves, which achieved admirable consistency but lacked the particular crust character that made Thursday's bread so memorable." This sort of precise historical bread specification was typical of Roman customer service expectations, reflecting the sophisticated palate preferences that had developed in a city where bread was both daily necessity and marker of social status. Marcus listened to these requirements with the sort of professional attention that had learned to distinguish between reasonable requests and impossible demands. "Of course, Gaius," Marcus replied diplomatically, "though I should mention that today's batch was prepared using grain from a different supplier, which may result in subtle variations in final texture despite identical preparation methods. However, I believe you'll find the overall character very much in line with your Thursday preferences." This explanation demonstrated the complex considerations that affected daily bread production, from grain sourcing and weather conditions to oven temperature variations and the countless small factors that could influence final results despite consistent technique and careful attention to traditional methods. Livia had been listening to this exchange with the sort of patient tolerance that tavern keepers developed for detailed discussions about food quality, but her commercial schedule required more efficient transaction completion. "Marcus," she interrupted politely, "I need 8 standard loaves for today's lunch service, with emphasis on structural integrity rather than specific aesthetic characteristics. My customers are more concerned with bread that can support substantial amounts of olive oil and wine than with achieving perfect crust coloration." This contrast between individual aesthetic preferences and commercial practicality was typical of the range of customer needs that Roman bakers had to accommodate. Successful bread selling required understanding not just baking techniques, but the various ways that different customers intended to use their purchases. Meanwhile, Brutus and Cassius had positioned themselves strategically near the bakery entrance, where they could observe bread handling activities while maintaining the sort of dignified distance that avoided accusations of aggressive begging. Their positioning demonstrated sophisticated understanding of human bread selling protocols and optimal timing for food acquisition opportunities. The morning light had strengthened while these customer consultations proceeded, and Marcus began the careful process of transferring finished loaves from ovens to display area. This required precise timing and systematic organization, as different types of bread finished baking at different rates and required specific handling techniques to maintain optimal temperature and texture. The first loaves to emerge were the standard white bread that formed the foundation of Roman urban diet. Simple, reliable loaves that provided essential nutrition while also serving as the basic unit of measurement for Roman commercial bread transactions. These were followed by specialty breads that required more complex preparation, loaves enriched with olive oil, bread studded with poppy seeds, and the sort of elaborate preparations that demonstrated Roman baking sophistication. Announced Gaius with obvious satisfaction as Marcus displayed the morning's white bread selection, that appears to achieve exactly the sort of golden brown coloration that characterized last Thursday's memorable batch. I believe we have achieved successful bread continuity. This sort of detailed aesthetic evaluation was typical of Roman customer engagement with daily bread purchases, reflecting the sophisticated appreciation for food quality that had developed in a civilization where cooking and eating were considered important cultural activities rather than mere survival necessities. The poppy seed bread emerged from the ovens with the sort of aromatic complexity that attracted immediate attention from both human customers and canine observers. The seeds had toasted during baking to develop the nutty fragrance that made this type of bread particularly popular among Romans who appreciated culinary sophistication, while the golden crust achieved exactly the sort of visual appeal that successful commercial baking required. Brutus and Cassius had apparently decided that the poppy seed bread warranted closer inspection, moving to positions that provided better observation of bread handling activities while still maintaining appropriate respect for human commercial protocols. Their alert postures suggested the sort of professional interest that food industry experts brought to evaluating new products. And so our Roman morning unfolds in the ancient rhythm of oven and street, where the greatest drama lies in achieving Thursday-level doneness and wisdom comes through patient navigation of customer preferences and canine diplomacy. Part 2. The poppy seed bread had achieved that perfect state of aromatic complexity that made Roman bakeries legendary throughout the known world, filling the morning air with the sort of nutty, yeast-enhanced fragrance that could transform even the most determined pessimist into someone willing to consider that perhaps the day held promise after all. Marcus carefully arranged the loaves in his display area with the sort of systematic attention that successful merchants brought to visual merchandising, understanding that Roman customers made purchasing decisions based on appearance, aroma, and the indefinable sense that they were obtaining bread worthy of their sophisticated metropolitan palates. But it was precisely at this moment of aromatic triumph that the morning's first genuine challenge arrived in the form of Claudius the complaint-bringer, a customer whose reputation for finding fault with perfectly acceptable merchandise had made him legendary among the neighborhood's commercial establishments. Claudius approached the bakery with the sort of determined expression that suggested he had spent considerable time during his walk developing detailed criticisms of whatever bread would be available for purchase. "Marcus?" Claudius announced with the sort of theatrical authority that indicated an important pronouncement was forthcoming. "I have several concerns about yesterday's purchase that require immediate discussion and appropriate commercial resolution." This opening gambit was typical of Claudius's approach to customer interaction, framing routine complaints as matters of civic importance while also establishing his credentials as someone whose opinion about bread quality deserved serious consideration. Marcus had learned through months of experience that successful management of Claudius required patience, diplomacy, and the sort of creative problem-solving that Roman politicians employed when dealing with particularly difficult senators. "Of course, Claudius," Marcus replied with practiced courtesy, "I'm always interested in feedback from valued customers. What specific aspects of yesterday's bread failed to meet your expectations?" Claudius produced from his toga a carefully wrapped piece of bread that appeared to have been preserved specifically for evidentiary purposes, unwrapping it with the sort of ceremonial attention that priests brought to revealing sacred objects. "This loaf," he announced, "demonstrates several concerning deviations from acceptable baking standards. First, the crust achieved excessive darkness on the western edge while remaining insufficiently developed on the eastern side, suggesting inadequate oven temperature management. Second, the crumb structure shows irregular air distribution that indicates either improper kneading or rushed rising time. Third, and most importantly, the overall flavor profile lacks the robust wheat character that I specifically requested when placing my order. This sort of detailed technical critique was typical of Roman customer service interactions, reflecting the sophisticated understanding of food production that had developed in a civilization where bread quality was considered a legitimate subject for serious discourse. Marcus listened to these concerns with the sort of professional attention that separated successful merchants from those who allowed customer complaints to escalate into neighborhood disputes. Meanwhile, Gaius had completed his inspection of the morning's white bread selection and was conducting what appeared to be final quality verification before committing to a purchase. His evaluation process involved visual assessment, careful aromatic analysis, and the sort of gentle prodding that tested crust resilience without damaging the merchandise, techniques that demonstrated genuine expertise in bread evaluation. The consistency appears excellent, Gaius announced with obvious satisfaction, and the coloration achieves exactly the golden brown character that made last Thursday's batch so memorable. I believe this represents successful reproduction of optimal baking parameters. This sort of positive customer feedback provided valuable balance to Claudius's complaints, reminding Marcus that bread quality was inevitably subjective and that successful commercial operation required satisfying the majority of customers rather than achieving impossible perfection for every individual preference. Livia had been waiting patiently for resolution of the bread critique session, but her commercial schedule required more efficient transaction completion. Marcus, she interjected diplomatically, while bread quality discussions are certainly important, I do need to complete my purchase and return to my establishment before the morning rush begins. Perhaps we could expedite the selection process. This request for efficiency was typical of Roman commercial interactions during busy periods, when the competing demands of quality assurance and time management required careful balancing of customer service priorities. Marcus had learned that successful bread selling involved understanding not just individual preferences but the various scheduling constraints that affected customer behavior. Brutus and Cassius had been observing these human commercial negotiations with the sort of patient attention that suggested they understood the connection between successful bread transactions and eventual food opportunities. Their positioning demonstrated sophisticated understanding of human customer service protocols and optimal timing for canine intervention in commercial activities. The morning sun had climbed higher while these customer consultations proceeded, creating the sort of warming atmosphere that made outdoor bread selling pleasant for vendors while also requiring careful attention to temperature management for displayed merchandise. Roman bread required specific storage conditions to maintain optimal quality, and successful commercial operation demanded understanding of how environmental factors affected product presentation. Marcus began addressing Claudius's concerns with the sort of systematic approach that had proven effective for managing difficult customer interactions. Regarding the crust development issues you've identified, he explained patiently, yesterday's baking coincided with unusual wind patterns that affected oven heat distribution. I've made adjustments to compensate for similar conditions in today's batch. This explanation demonstrated the complex environmental factors that could influence daily bread production, from weather conditions and fuel quality to the countless small variables that separated excellent baking from merely adequate results. Roman bakers had learned to adapt their techniques to accommodate these changing conditions while maintaining consistent quality standards. The crumb structure concerns are certainly valid, Marcus continued, and I believe they resulted from rushing the rising process to accommodate the early morning delivery schedule for the gladiator school. Today's bread has received full rising time, which should address the air distribution issues you observed. This reference to gladiator school bread deliveries added an element of exotic Roman context to the mundane business of customer complaint resolution, reminding everyone present that their neighborhood baker served clients whose bread requirements were connected to the famous entertainment industry that made Rome legendary throughout the civilized world. Claudius examined this explanation with the sort of serious attention that indicated he was evaluating both the technical content and the sincerity of Marcus's response. The environmental compensation measures seem reasonable, he acknowledged grudgingly, though I remain concerned about consistency management during variable weather conditions. Perhaps we could discuss preventive strategies for maintaining uniform quality regardless of atmospheric challenges. This request for advanced technical consultation was typical of Claudius's approach to customer interaction, transforming simple bread purchases into elaborate discussions about production methodology while also demonstrating his sophisticated understanding of baking science. Marcus had learned that treating such requests seriously usually resulted in eventual purchase completion and reduced future complaints. The poppy seed bread had continued to release its enticing aroma during these negotiations, attracting increased attention from both human customers and canine observers. The seeds had achieved exactly the sort of toasted perfection that made this specialty bread particularly popular among Romans who appreciated culinary sophistication, while the overall presentation suggested the kind of quality that justified premium pricing. The poppy seed preparation appears exceptionally successful this morning, Gaius observed, apparently having completed his white bread evaluation and become interested in additional purchases. The seed distribution achieves optimal density without overwhelming the basic bread character, and the aromatic development suggests ideal toasting technique. This sort of positive technical feedback was exactly what Marcus hoped to hear during challenging customer service situations, as it demonstrated that his baking skills were achieving recognition from knowledgeable consumers who understood the complexities involved in successful specialty bread production. Livia had apparently decided that the technical discussions were unlikely to conclude quickly enough for her commercial requirements. "Marcus," she announced with polite firmness, "I'll take my usual 8 standard loaves, and I trust they'll maintain your consistently excellent quality standards. I've never had cause for complaint, and I'm confident today's batch will continue that tradition." This sort of efficient customer interaction represented the foundation of successful Roman commercial operation. Customers who understood product quality, trusted vendor competence, and conducted transactions without requiring elaborate consultation about technical details. Marcus appreciated Livia's straightforward approach, which allowed him to focus on more complex customer service challenges. As Marcus began selecting Livia's order from the morning's bread production, Brutus decided that the increased human activity warranted closer observation. The large dog moved to a position that provided better visual access to bread handling activities while maintaining appropriate respect for commercial protocols, demonstrating the sort of strategic thinking that had made him successful in the competitive field of neighborhood food acquisition. Cassius, meanwhile, had apparently concluded that the morning's bread aroma levels justified more aggressive positioning. The smaller dog approached the bakery entrance with the sort of optimistic confidence that suggested complete faith in his ability to obtain food through charm and strategic timing, though his approach remained within the bounds of acceptable canine commercial behavior. "I see our morning bread critics have arrived for their daily evaluation," Marcus observed with amusement, noting the dog's obvious interest in the proceedings. Brutus and Cassius maintain very high standards for neighborhood bread quality, and their approval is considered quite valuable by discerning customers. This acknowledgement of canine food expertise was typical of Roman neighborhood culture, where regular animal visitors were often treated as unofficial members of the commercial community. The dog's consistent presence and obvious bread appreciation had made them popular with customers who enjoyed the entertainment value of observing canine reactions to food preparation activities. Claudius had apparently reached a decision point regarding his complaint resolution and potential new purchase. "Given your explanation of yesterday's environmental challenges and the preventive measures you've implemented," he announced formally, "I'm prepared to give today's bread a fair evaluation. I'll take 1 standard loaf, with the understanding that any quality deviations will require further discussion." This conditional purchase approval was typical of Claudius's approach to customer transactions, maintaining his reputation for quality vigilance while also acknowledging reasonable explanations for previous problems. Marcus accepted this arrangement with relief, understanding that successful Claudius management required patience and the sort of diplomatic skills that Roman merchants developed through experience with demanding customers. The morning's bread transactions were proceeding with increasing efficiency as customers became more decisive about their purchases and Marcus developed better rhythm in his service delivery. The combination of satisfied customers, successful complaint resolution, and obvious canine approval created exactly the sort of positive commercial atmosphere that encouraged additional sales and neighborhood reputation enhancement. And so our Roman morning continues its ancient dance of commerce and complaint, where customer satisfaction requires the diplomatic skills of a senator and success is measured in satisfied customers and strategically positioned dogs. Part 3. The morning's commercial rhythm had settled into that productive efficiency that characterized successful Roman marketplace operations. When customers understood product quality, vendors demonstrated consistent competence, and transactions proceeded with the sort of mutual satisfaction that made neighborhood commerce both profitable and socially pleasant. Marcus had successfully managed Claudius's technical complaints, completed Livia's straightforward order, and maintained the sort of diplomatic customer service that kept even the most demanding clients returning for future purchases. But it was precisely at this moment of commercial harmony that the morning's most challenging customer appeared in the form of Quintus the price questioner, a man whose approach to bread purchasing involved elaborate negotiations about cost, value, and the theoretical relationship between Roman currency systems and optimal nutrition delivery. Quintus arrived at the bakery with the sort of determined expression that suggested he had spent considerable mental energy developing economic arguments about bread pricing during his walk through the city streets. "Marcus, my friend," Quintus began with the sort of calculated friendliness that indicated complex financial discussions were about to commence, "I find myself in need of bread this morning, but I must confess to serious concerns about current pricing structures in relation to grain market fluctuations and seasonal availability factors." This opening gambit was typical of Quintus's approach to commercial interaction, framing routine purchases as opportunities for elaborate economic analysis while also establishing his credentials as someone whose understanding of market dynamics deserved serious consideration. Marcus had learned through previous encounters that successful Quintus management required patience, flexibility, and the sort of creative pricing solutions that Roman merchants developed when dealing with customers who treated every transaction as a learning opportunity in applied economics. "Of course, Quintus," Marcus replied diplomatically, "I'm always interested in discussing the economic factors that affect bread pricing. What specific aspects of current cost structures concern you?" Quintus produced from his toga what appeared to be a carefully prepared scroll containing detailed notes about grain prices, transportation costs, and baker profit margins throughout various Roman neighborhoods. "According to my research," he announced with scholarly authority, "grain prices have decreased by approximately 3% over the past month, while bread prices in this district have remained stable. This suggests either inefficient cost management or the possibility of excessive profit margins that don't reflect current market conditions." This sort of detailed economic analysis was typical of Roman customer service challenges, reflecting the sophisticated understanding of commerce and economics that had developed in a civilization where marketplace negotiations were considered legitimate intellectual exercises rather than simple buying and selling activities. Meanwhile, a new customer had joined the growing queue outside Marcus's bakery, a well-dressed woman whose appearance suggested either wealthy household management responsibilities or professional food service requirements. She waited with the sort of patient dignity that indicated experience with Roman commercial procedures, though her occasional glances toward the ongoing price negotiations suggested that her own schedule might not accommodate extended economic discussions. Gaius, having completed his successful white bread purchase, had apparently become interested in observing Quintus's pricing methodology. "Fascinating approach to market analysis," he commented approvingly. "Though I wonder whether transportation cost variables have been adequately factored into your calculations, particularly regarding seasonal fuel price fluctuations for oven heating." This injection of additional technical considerations into an already complex economic discussion was typical of Roman intellectual culture, where educated citizens enjoyed participating in elaborate analytical conversations regardless of their direct relevance to immediate practical needs. Brutus and Cassius had been following these human commercial negotiations with the sort of alert attention that suggested they understood the connection between successful price resolution and eventual food distribution opportunities. Their positioning demonstrated sophisticated appreciation for the timing of customer service interactions and optimal moments for canine intervention in bread-related activities. The morning sun had continued its progression across the Roman sky, creating increasingly warm conditions that required careful attention to bread storage and display management. Marcus had learned that successful commercial operation demanded understanding not just customer preferences and pricing strategies, but the environmental factors that affected product quality throughout the selling day. Your market analysis raises valid points, Marcus acknowledged, examining Quintus's detailed notes with professional interest. However, I should mention that my pricing reflects not just grain costs but also fuel expenses, labor considerations, and the overhead costs associated with maintaining commercial quality baking facilities in a prime Roman location. This explanation demonstrated the complex factors that influenced Roman bread pricing, from raw material costs and production expenses to the commercial real estate considerations that affected neighborhood bakery economics. Successful bread selling required balancing customer affordability with business sustainability while maintaining competitive positioning against other local food vendors. Quintus studied this response with the sort of serious attention that indicated he was evaluating both the economic logic and the negotiation potential of Marcus's position. The overhead considerations are certainly legitimate, he conceded thoughtfully, though I would argue that prime location advantages should generate sufficient volume increases to offset higher operational costs through economy of scale benefits. This sort of sophisticated economic reasoning was exactly what Marcus had learned to expect from Quintus's purchasing methodology, intelligent analysis combined with the persistent optimism that every transaction could be improved through better understanding of underlying market dynamics. The well-dressed woman who had been waiting patiently during these price negotiations apparently decided that her schedule required more active intervention. "Excuse me," she announced with polite firmness, "but I represent the household of Senator Lucius Cornelius, and I require immediate purchase of specialty bread for an important morning reception. Perhaps we could expedite the transaction process." This reference to senatorial household requirements immediately elevated the commercial priority level, as Roman merchants understood that satisfied upper-class customers could significantly enhance neighborhood reputation while dissatisfied senatorial representatives could create the sort of problems that affected long-term business prospects. "Certainly, madam," Marcus replied with enhanced courtesy, recognizing both the commercial opportunity and the diplomatic necessity of prioritizing high-status customers. "What specific bread requirements does the senator's household need for this morning's reception?" The senator's representative produced her own scroll, though hers contained what appeared to be detailed specifications for various types of specialty bread rather than economic analysis of pricing structures. "We require 12 loaves of your finest white bread, 8 loaves with poppy seeds, and 6 loaves prepared with olive oil enrichment. Additionally, the senator has specifically requested bread that demonstrates optimal Roman character without being overly ostentatious." This sort of diplomatically complex order was typical of upper-class Roman entertaining requirements, where food quality had to be exceptional while also conveying appropriate social messages about the host's taste, sophistication, and understanding of proper entertaining protocols. Quintus had been listening to this exchange with obvious fascination, apparently recognizing an opportunity to observe high-level commercial negotiations while also potentially learning about premium bread pricing structures. "Interesting specifications," he commented approvingly. The reference to optimal Roman character suggests sophisticated understanding of the relationship between food presentation and social messaging. This sort of intellectual commentary on customer requirements was typical of Roman neighborhood culture, where educated citizens enjoyed analyzing the social and cultural implications of commercial activities regardless of their direct involvement in the transactions. Marcus began the careful process of selecting bread that would meet senatorial entertaining standards while also managing the ongoing price negotiations with Quintus and maintaining attention to his other customers' needs. This required the sort of multitasking skills that successful Roman merchants developed through experience with complex customer service situations. The poppy seed bread selection required particular attention, as senatorial receptions demanded not just excellent quality but consistent visual presentation that would reflect positively on both the host's judgment and the baker's professional competence. Marcus examined each loaf with the sort of critical eye that separated acceptable commercial bread from the premium products that upper-class Roman entertaining required. "Excellent selection criteria," observed Gaius, who had been watching the senatorial bread evaluation with professional interest. The poppy seed distribution achieves optimal visual impact while maintaining structural integrity suitable for formal presentation. This sort of detailed quality commentary was appreciated by customers who understood the technical considerations involved in premium bread production, while also providing educational content for observers like Quintus who were interested in understanding the factors that justified various pricing levels. Brutus had apparently decided that the increased commercial activity warranted closer supervision, moving to a position where he could observe bread handling procedures while also maintaining optimal access to any food opportunities that might arise from increased customer traffic. His strategic positioning demonstrated the sort of professional food acquisition skills that had made him successful in the competitive Roman street dog economy. Cassius, meanwhile, had focused his attention on the senator's representative, apparently recognizing that upper-class customers often maintained different standards regarding appropriate food sharing with neighborhood animals. His approach demonstrated the sort of diplomatic sensitivity that successful Roman dogs developed when dealing with various social classes and their different attitudes toward canine interaction. The morning's commercial complexity was approaching levels that required systematic priority management and careful attention to customer satisfaction across multiple simultaneous transactions. Marcus had learned that success in such situations demanded clear communication, efficient service delivery, and the sort of diplomatic flexibility that could accommodate competing customer needs without creating neighborhood disputes. As he continued selecting bread for the senatorial order while maintaining dialogue with Quintus about pricing methodology, Marcus reflected on the peculiar challenges of Roman commercial life, where every bread purchase could potentially involve economic theory, social psychology, political considerations, and the sort of customer service skills that would challenge even experienced diplomats. And so our Roman morning deepens into the complex choreography of commerce and social hierarchy, where bread selling requires the economic wisdom of a philosopher and the diplomatic skills of a senator's aide. Part 4 Final. The morning had reached that critical juncture where successful Roman commerce required the sort of diplomatic juggling that would challenge even experienced circus performers, as Marcus found himself simultaneously managing Quintus's elaborate economic negotiations, fulfilling the senator's representative's premium bread order, and maintaining the general customer satisfaction that kept neighborhood commercial relationships functioning smoothly. The complexity of serving multiple demanding customers while preserving his reputation for quality and fairness had escalated to levels that tested every customer service skill he had developed through years of Roman marketplace experience. The senatorial bread selection was proceeding with the sort of meticulous attention that upper-class entertaining required, each loaf examined for the perfect balance of visual appeal and structural integrity that would reflect positively on both the senator's judgment and Marcus's professional competence. The poppy seed bread had achieved exactly the sort of elegant sophistication that Roman elite entertaining demanded: golden crust with evenly distributed seeds that created attractive visual patterns without overwhelming the fundamental bread character. Exceptional quality, pronounced the senator's representative with obvious satisfaction, examining the selected loaves with the sort of critical eye that indicated genuine expertise in evaluating food for high-level social functions. These will serve admirably for this morning's reception. The senator will be pleased with both the visual presentation and the obvious attention to traditional Roman baking standards. This sort of upper-class approval was exactly what Marcus hoped to achieve with his premium bread production, as satisfied senatorial customers could enhance neighborhood reputation while also providing the sort of word-of-mouth advertising that reached influential Roman social circles. Success with elite clientele often led to additional high-status orders that could significantly improve a baker's commercial prospects. Meanwhile, Quintus had been conducting what appeared to be final calculations regarding his economic analysis of bread pricing structures, his scroll now covered with additional notes and mathematical computations that suggested he was approaching some sort of conclusion about the theoretical relationship between grain costs and fair retail pricing. Based on my comprehensive market analysis, Quintus announced with scholarly authority, I believe current bread prices, while perhaps slightly elevated compared to raw material costs, fall within acceptable parameters when overhead expenses and quality considerations are properly factored into the economic equation. I'm prepared to complete a purchase at standard pricing, with the understanding that future price adjustments should reflect market condition changes. This grudging acceptance of current pricing represented a significant victory in the ongoing economic negotiations, as Quintus's approval suggested that Marcus's cost structure could withstand detailed financial scrutiny from knowledgeable customers who understood Roman commercial economics. The successful resolution of price challenges also demonstrated the value of patient explanation and transparent discussion of business considerations. But it was precisely at this moment of apparent commercial success that the morning's final challenge appeared in the form of Sextus the specific demander, a customer whose reputation for impossible requests had made him legendary among Roman merchants throughout the city. Sextus approached the bakery with the sort of determined expression that indicated he had spent considerable time developing requirements that would test Marcus's problem-solving abilities and diplomatic skills to their absolute limits. "Marcus," Sextus began with the sort of ominous politeness that experienced merchants learned to recognize as a warning of impending complications, "I require bread for this afternoon's family gathering, but with very particular specifications that reflect my detailed memory of your previous excellent work." This opening statement was typical of Sextus's approach to customer interaction, establishing impossible standards based on idealized recollections of past purchases while also creating expectations that would challenge even the most skilled baker's ability to reproduce specific results under different conditions. Marcus steeled himself for what experience had taught him would be an elaborate discussion about minutely detailed bread preferences. "Of course, Sextus," he replied with practiced diplomacy, "I'm always interested in meeting specific customer requirements. What particular characteristics are you seeking?" Sextus produced what appeared to be detailed written notes about his bread preferences, unrolling a scroll that contained what looked like architectural diagrams combined with culinary specifications. "I require bread that achieves exactly the same level of doneness that you produced 3 weeks ago on the Tuesday morning following the Festival of Mars, but with the crust texture that characterized last month's Friday afternoon batch, combined with the interior moistness that made your bread from the morning after the gladiator games so memorable." This sort of temporal-specific bread archaeology was typical of Sextus's purchasing methodology, requiring Marcus to somehow remember and reproduce exact characteristics from multiple different baking sessions while also combining elements that might not be technically compatible under normal baking conditions. The gathering crowd of customers had been listening to this exchange with the sort of fascinated attention that Romans brought to observing elaborate public performances, recognizing that they were witnessing a classic confrontation between customer specificity and practical possibility. Several regular customers nodded knowingly, apparently familiar with Sextus's reputation for impossible requests. Gaius, still present and apparently enjoying the entertainment value of complex customer service interactions, offered helpful commentary. "Fascinating approach to bread specification," he observed approvingly. "Though I wonder whether atmospheric conditions during those various baking sessions might have created variables that could affect reproduction accuracy." This injection of additional technical considerations into an already complex situation was typical of Roman intellectual culture, where educated citizens enjoyed contributing analytical perspectives to public discussions regardless of their practical utility for resolving immediate problems. Brutus and Cassius had been observing these escalating customer service challenges with the sort of alert attention that suggested they understood the connection between human commercial stress levels and potential food distribution opportunities. Their positioning demonstrated sophisticated appreciation for the psychology of Roman marketplace negotiations and optimal timing for canine intervention in complex social situations. Marcus examined Sextus's detailed specifications with the sort of careful attention that separated successful merchants from those who allowed impossible customer demands to escalate into neighborhood disputes. The requests were indeed technically challenging, requiring combination of characteristics that had been achieved under different conditions and with different environmental factors affecting the baking process. "Your specifications are certainly detailed," Marcus acknowledged diplomatically, "and I appreciate your memory for the various excellent results we've achieved in the past. However, I should mention that reproducing exact characteristics from different baking sessions requires consideration of variables like weather conditions, grain quality variations, and seasonal factors that affect oven performance. This explanation of practical baking limitations was delivered with the sort of patient professionalism that experienced Roman merchants employed when educating customers about the realities of artisanal production. The goal was to maintain customer satisfaction while also establishing reasonable expectations about what could be achieved under current conditions. Sextus studied this response with the sort of intense concentration that indicated he was evaluating both the technical content and the negotiation potential of Marcus's position. The environmental factors are certainly relevant, he conceded thoughtfully, though I would argue that truly skilled bakers should be able to compensate for such variables through technique adjustments and experience-based adaptation. This sort of escalated expectation was exactly what Marcus had learned to expect from Sextus's purchasing methodology, acknowledging practical difficulties while also maintaining that superior craftsmanship should somehow transcend normal limitations through mysterious professional abilities. The senator's representative had completed her transaction and departed with obvious satisfaction, her successful purchase creating the sort of positive commercial atmosphere that enhanced Marcus's reputation while also providing practical demonstration of his ability to satisfy demanding upper-class customers. This success story served as valuable evidence of professional competence during challenging customer service situations. The morning sun had climbed to its full strength, creating the sort of warming conditions that made outdoor bread selling pleasant while also requiring careful attention to product storage and display management. The increasing temperature reminded Marcus that successful commercial operation demanded constant adaptation to changing environmental conditions throughout the selling day. "I believe I can achieve results that will satisfy your requirements," Marcus announced after careful consideration of Sextus's complex specifications. Though I should mention that exact reproduction of past characteristics is less important than creating bread that meets your current needs and preferences. Today's batch reflects optimal technique applied to current conditions. This diplomatic reframing of customer expectations was typical of successful Roman merchant strategies, shifting focus from impossible reproduction of past results to achievable excellence under present circumstances while maintaining respect for customer preferences and memory. Quintus, having completed his own successful purchase, had apparently become interested in observing the resolution of Sextus's challenging requirements. "Excellent approach to specification management," he commented approvingly. The emphasis on current optimization rather than historical reproduction demonstrates sophisticated understanding of practical production limitations. This sort of intellectual support from satisfied customers provided valuable assistance during complex customer service challenges, as peer approval helped establish reasonable expectations while also validating Marcus's professional judgment about what could be practically achieved. Sextus examined the available bread selection with the sort of critical attention that indicated he was evaluating current products against his elaborate historical specifications. The process involved detailed visual inspection, careful aromatic analysis, and the sort of contemplative assessment that suggested serious internal debate about acceptable compromise levels. "The current batch does appear to achieve excellent quality standards," Sextus admitted grudgingly, "and the coloration suggests optimal baking technique. I suppose current excellence is preferable to imperfect attempts at historical reproduction." This graceful acceptance of practical limitations represented a significant victory in customer service diplomacy, as Sextus's approval indicated that Marcus's quality standards could satisfy even the most demanding Roman customers when approached with appropriate patience and professional explanation. Brutus had apparently decided that the successful resolution of complex customer service challenges warranted celebratory attention, moving closer to the bakery entrance with the sort of optimistic confidence that suggested complete faith in his ability to obtain food through charm and strategic timing. His approach remained within acceptable bounds of canine commercial behavior while also demonstrating appreciation for human problem-solving skills. Cassius, meanwhile, had positioned himself to observe the final transaction completion, apparently understanding that successful customer satisfaction often resulted in the sort of positive atmosphere that encouraged generous food sharing with neighborhood animal residents. His strategic positioning demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Roman commercial psychology and optimal moments for canine intervention. As the morning's complex customer service challenges reached successful resolution, Marcus reflected on the peculiar satisfaction that came from managing Roman commercial life, where every bread purchase could potentially involve economic theory, social psychology, historical memory, and the sort of diplomatic skills that would challenge experienced senators. The successful navigation of competing customer demands while maintaining neighborhood reputation and commercial profitability represented exactly the kind of achievement that made Roman marketplace operations both challenging and deeply rewarding. The bakery had demonstrated its ability to satisfy customers ranging from simple neighborhood regulars to demanding senatorial representatives, price-conscious economists, and specification-obsessed perfectionists, all while maintaining the sort of quality standards that kept Roman bread consumers returning for future purchases. It was exactly the kind of comprehensive commercial success that sustainable neighborhood businesses required for long-term prosperity. As the satisfied customers departed with their carefully selected bread and Brutus and Cassius positioned themselves for their well-earned morning treats, Marcus surveyed his successfully managed morning with the sort of quiet satisfaction that came from professional competence applied to challenging circumstances. The Roman day stretched ahead with promise of continued commercial success and the knowledge that his neighborhood bakery had once again proven its ability to serve the sophisticated demands of metropolitan customers while maintaining the sort of quality standards that made Roman bread legendary throughout the civilized world. And so our Roman morning reaches its triumphant conclusion, with impossible customer demands successfully navigated through diplomatic expertise and professional competence, while the eternal rhythm of bread and commerce continues its ancient dance in the streets where civilization learned to transform grain into gold through patient application of skill, customer service, and the occasional well-timed canine intervention. The end.